Today, on today's podcast, I want to talk to you about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, March Madness. March Madness, of course, many of you know my love for the sport of basketball, but this podcast isn't just about basketball. We're going to be talking today beyond basketball for me, because March Madness it's an annual reminder about hope, connection, going for it, and the power of leadership, culture, and teams every single day beyond basketball. So every year, the drama and the lessons play out right in front of our eyes. And today we're going to talk about and remind ourselves of some of those lessons that we need to carry with us beyond the basketball court. Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast, wherever you are or however you are coming to the podcast today. So glad you are back. If you are one of the originals, one of the OGs that have been with us from the very beginning of the podcast, welcome back. So glad you continue to find value, and this continues to contribute to your day, your week, your month. So glad you are a part of this. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. So glad you're here. There's been great excitement and growth and energy around this podcast as it continues to grow and spread all over the place. We are now in season 6, well over 100 episodes, great energy, great growth, and so glad to be continuing it with you all today. It is my commitment and my belief and my commitment to all of you that this is going to continue to be a place in your day and your week and your month, a place for you to step back, for you to think, for you to be filled with positive messages and help connect with wherever you are in your own life, but also your role as a leader in whatever team or organization, or just if you're thinking about your family, your friends, your community, an organization you might serve. And then certainly, if you are somebody in the midst of a team or organization or a company that is in the pursuit right now of creating that kind of compelling culture, then so glad that you're here, and so glad that this will be adding value to your thinking along the way. I'm more convinced of this than ever, that authentic leadership is needed in the world today. We need authentic leaders. We need people that care, that stay mission focused, that are able to bring people together and create a compelling culture that's bigger than ourselves. And if you've listened to the podcast recently or certainly coming up, we're going to be talking about a lot of topics that certainly point to everything that's happening in the world and how important creating culture is. So before we launch into today's topic, if you would do me a quick favor, I know I hate asking for this, but it's just a real quick, very quick favor. So if anybody is willing to do this, thank you so much. One quick thing way you can help is to rate this podcast 5 stars, of course, on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to. Just stop and just rate it for a second. 5 stars, please. Also, if you'd be willing to leave a genuine and authentic review of the podcast, how it's added value or what you think about it, and how it, messages that you want to support in the world. If you will do that, those are the ways in which the algorithms help, people find this podcast and spread it further into the world. So if you will rate and review, that's great. And then, of course, every time that you invite other people, share this podcast with others in your network, across your team, your organization, your friend group. That's the way that this continues to amplify and spread the messages. So thank you to everybody who takes a moment to do that. Today, on today's podcast, I want to talk to you about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, March Madness. March Madness, of course, many of you know my love for the sport of basketball, but this podcast isn't just about basketball. We're going to be talking today beyond basketball for me, because March Madness it's an annual reminder about hope, connection, going for it, and the power of leadership, culture, and teams every single day beyond basketball. So every year, the drama and the lessons play out right in front of our eyes. And today we're going to talk about and remind ourselves of some of those lessons that we need to carry with us beyond the basketball court. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually, with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference, or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. So even if you aren't a basketball fan, hang with me during this podcast, this episode, because the imagery, the lessons, the analogies are meaningful for everything outside of basketball, even if you're not a big basketball fan. And if you are a big basketball fan, then I think you will appreciate just this kind of reflection on the great March Madness tournament that we just wrapped up. Again, those of you that know me well, you know that, as we get close to March every single year, I am giddy as a little kid. I get so excited about the release of the tournament, the bracket, who's going to be in the bracket, and everything that comes with that. 3 weeks of just competition and really, as you'll hear me talk about today, that the experience of believing, of hope, of aligning as a team, of coming together, working together, executing a plan, and then performing when it matters most. All of those elements are so dramatic, and again, that's why they call it madness for the basketball tournament. But all of these things that we're talking about are observations and lessons and reminders for us outside of basketball. So I'm excited. This was an amazing tournament this year, filled with so many examples of these kind of things that we're going to talk about today. And just quickly, we're going to remind us of these things that really teach us and remind us of some things beyond the basketball court. So some general observations and foundational things that March Madness remind us of every year. Every year it doesn't disappoint. Every year without fail, the March Madness tournament reminds us of these things that, again, go beyond the basketball court. So when you think about the teams in your life, in your work, the groups of people that come together to accomplish anything that's bigger than themselves, that March Madness reminds us of these things every single year. It reminds us of things like the most talented teams don't always win. The most talented teams don't always win. And every single year, of course, talent is incredibly important. Every organization, every team on the planet is looking for the most talented people, the most skilled people. But and we need to continue to look for that. But this is a reminder that the best teams, the best organizations are not just a collection of the most talent. Again, in basketball, it's not the best 5 individual players on the court. It's the best group of 5 and how they play together, how they perform, how they execute, how aligned and connected they are. Those are the teams that advance. So when you think about it, again, this year's tournament is an example of that. Probably the most talented team in the tournament was that Duke team. If you're not a basketball fan, then this, you know of Duke, I'm sure. But if you are, then you'll know this intimately. That Duke team probably has 4, if not 5, first-round, NBA draft picks on the roster. So from a pure talent perspective and what talent evaluators look at and say, those are the future most talented players, they don't always win. And so whereas, again, Duke had a great tournament, they made it to the Final Four, but why are they maybe an example of not cutting down the nets, not being the team to actually win the national championship? It's a reminder to us again that it's not just about the most talented, individual players. It's about the best collection of talent and how they play and operate together. So a reminder to us all that it's not just about talent. Talent is super important. Skill is super important, of course, but it's not just about that. The other reminder, of course, is if you're in the dance, if you're in the tournament, you're in the bracket, you can advance. Things can happen. Again, it's called madness for a reason. And it reminds us every single year that once you are in and you have an opportunity, it doesn't mean that only one team wins the national championship. But every single team in there has an opportunity to advance and to shock people and perform above what anybody thinks is possible. So a reminder to every team and organization on the planet that's trying to accomplish anything, again, beyond the basketball court. If you're in the game, it's possible. It's possible to advance. It's possible to progress. It's possible to do things that others don't think is possible for you. And it's proven that way every single year. Again, an example from this past tournament is St. Peter's. Nobody, very few people even knew where St. Peter's was, who St. Peter's was, but this tiny little school, St. Peter's, went on maybe the most magical run in the history of the tournament. A 15 seed to make it to the Elite Eight, the first time that's ever happened. So, they are an example playing out right in front of our face. They beat, the mammoth teams, these teams, Kentucky, the blue blood of college basketball, beat Kentucky. They beat a Murray State team who was a 30-win team, a 7 seed in the tournament. They beat Purdue, who was perhaps the best team in the Big Ten, and another team that people thought very highly of. So they advanced way further than anybody thought was possible. So if you're in the dance, you can always advance. Another reminder is every team needs a little luck, a good bounce to go your way, and that any team can stumble. In this tournament, it's the part of the magic of it is that it's one game. And so even if you are the best team or you've been the best team for an entire season, I'll share this again if you listen to this, that I've had great admiration for Gonzaga. And Gonzaga came into this year's tournament as the number 1 overall seed. Another amazing season they've had. And by all metrics, they were, probably the best team in the country coming into this year's tournament. But in a one-game scenario, if you have one bad night where your team isn't executing as well as possible, in this case, when they had a night where they missed shots, they had uncharacteristic turnovers, where they weren't dialed in and as focused as they typically are, you have a chance to get beat. And so even the best teams can stumble, and then every team that advances needs a little bit of luck, a good bounce come their way. As you look at the national champion from this year's tournament, Kansas, the Kansas Jayhawks, who are a great team and proved to continue to get better throughout the year and really earned this championship, they also got a little lucky and got some good bounces along the way. In the Final Four, they ended up playing a team, Villanova, who was missing their second leading scorer, who got injured right before that game. So again, to take nothing away from Kansas, they had an amazing tournament, but they also got a little lucky that they got to play Villanova when Villanova was missing their second leading scorer and one of their most important players. In the national championship game, then they also, were playing North Carolina, who one of their key players had an ankle injury and was hobbled the whole game. So even winning and getting to the ultimate goal requires a little bit of luck and or good bounces that come your way, no matter how good a team you are. And so every single year when I think about the March Madness tournament, and then, of course, I think about what it means for teams and organizations beyond basketball, I think about many different things, but 5 elements of best teams come to my mind. 5 elements of best teams that I feel like I observe this every single year as a part of March Madness. And every year it reminds me to step back and think about the teams and organizations that I support, that I'm a part of, and remind myself of these kind of 5 elements of best teams. So I'm going to share them with you right now. 5 elements of the best teams. 1, they believe that it is possible. They believe that it is possible. So everything starts with belief. On your team, your organization, whatever it is that your mission is or what you're trying to accomplish as a group, I believe it all begins with, do you and your teammates, the people that are a part of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, do you believe that it's possible? Do you have a vision, a dream, and do you believe in each other and believe that hey, we are here for a reason, and we are able to continue to progress and get better and reach our goals. It begins with belief. So on the best teams, again, outside of basketball, belief and believing that whatever your goal is, your mission is possible is critical. Again, I'll use St. Peter's as an example from this year's tournament. They believed that they belonged. They believed even when they played in the first round Kentucky, who nobody gave them a chance, they believed they belonged and that they could win. And so everything starts with belief. The second element of best teams they are connected. They are connected to each other, and connected to a mission, a clear mission. What are we trying to do? A vision for the type of team they're trying to become, and the values of how they're connected and how they're going to commit to working together. They understand their roles. Each player has a role on the team. They're connected and they understand the style of play. So again, beyond basketball, teams that understand their roles, how is it that they're going to work together? They're committed to the strategy and how they're going to play together. What is the pace at which they're going to work? You think about, again, teams like, all 4 teams that made it to the Final Four were a great example of this. Teams that they continued to advance because of how connected they were. You think about senior-laden teams like Villanova and Kansas. You think about these connected groups of people that were clear on their roles, clear on their strategy, clear on their pace of play, and they were committed to that and connected to it together. The third thing to remind ourselves about elements of the best teams is adversity arrives. Adversity arrives. Every single time, no matter what it is that we're involved in, no matter project, anything that you're in outside of the basketball court, adversity will come. And it happens on the basketball court, of course, too, that, undoubtedly for all of us, something will not go the way that you hoped. Something will not go the way that you planned. And when it arrives, do you pull away from each other as a team or do you pull towards each other as a team? And every single year, we watch this unfold in very dramatic fashion in the tournament. And it's a reminder, again, on every team and organization on the planet, this also is true. When something arrives that it comes to the surface that is adversity, a challenge, obstacles that are in front of us, does the team respond by blaming, finger pointing, losing their cool and turning on each other and away from each other? Or do they take personal responsibility and ownership? Do they lean in towards each other? Do they, pull each other together and lift each other up? I think about this North Carolina team that made it all the way to the championship game. Early on in the tournament, they were up 25 points and looked like they were cruising to a victory over Baylor. And all of a sudden, in about a 10-minute stretch, Baylor erased a 25-point lead. And it looked like North Carolina was melting down and adversity had arrived, and all of a sudden this 25-point lead that they had was gone. And all of a sudden, in the midst of that moment, they had to pull together and then make some critical plays and grasp a hold of that game again. So no matter what, even when you're up 25, challenges and obstacles will arrive for your team and organization. And so do you take personal ownership? Do you pull together rather than pulling apart? And eventually then make sure that you do what's necessary to move yourselves forward. The fourth thing I'll remind you of, and all of us of, is execution matters. That, of course, on every team and organization, execution matters. The best teams are prepared and have a game plan, a strategy, and are able to make adjustments along the way. They're agile, they're adaptable, and they're able to execute together. They know on every possession in a basketball game, what are we trying to accomplish? How are we committed to trying to attack the defense in this particular way? And the same thing is true outside of the basketball court. Does your team and organization have a strategy? This is how we're committed to playing. This is our strategy. This is how we're going to execute our plans. And even in the midst of challenges, of course, making adjustments along the way. If you watch the national championship game, Kansas was down, 15 points at halftime to North Carolina, and they made a couple of key basketball strategic adjustments that then in the second half began to pay off dividends right away. And so the adjustments they made at halftime of the style and the way they were playing started to matter. And of course, then executing along the way made them ultimately win the national championship. And the last thing to remind ourselves of the 5 elements of best teams is, frankly, they lead. They lead. During pressure moments, big and small, their leaders stay focused on their task at hand and how they are committed to working together. Everyone a part of the team, they set a temperature for those around them. They're grateful for the opportunity. They're honored that they get a chance to perform. And again, instead of splintering and pulling apart, they look at each other and they say, we're going to lead forward. And that doesn't mean that we're guaranteed to win, but the best teams are committed to setting that temperature for each other. So in teams and organizations beyond basketball, these 5 elements of the best teams exist. But it often comes down to what I talk about. Where you look is where you go. And on every team and organization on the planet, the best are the ones that believe it's possible, are connected to one another and connected to stay aligned in that mission, vision, and values. When adversity arrives, they are able to pull towards each other rather than away from each other. Execution matters, which means, do they have strategy and are they committed to executing and in the pressure moments be able to be agile and adaptable and execute? And lastly, they're committed to leading, personal ownership to lead things forward. So some questions for us to ponder for today, and some of these examples and lessons and reflections from March Madness that make us think about the teams and organizations that we serve in our life and our work. What do you and your team believe is possible? What do you and your team believe is possible? What are you doing to build connection and get clear on your mission, your vision, your values, and your strategy? And when adversity arrives, are you clear on the temperature you hope to set and how you want to execute as leaders? When adversity arrives, because it will at some point, is your team clear on the temperature that you're trying to set? How are we going to respond when things don't go our way? And how do we want to execute as leaders? Remember, the best teams and organizations and companies on the planet practice these 5 elements. They believe it's possible. They're connected and always trying to align themselves together. When adversity arrives, they're agile and they have clarity around how they want to show up. They're committed to execution and the strategy that they're putting in the plan into practice, and they lead. They set a temperature for themselves and for people around them. So every March, we've got to embrace the madness, and every year we're reminded that the best teams outside of basketball on the planet practice these 5 elements. And for you and your team and your organization, it's our opportunity to set that temperature, to be a thermostat. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.